For years in this country, the prime users of opiates were people who had become addicted after operations, like the soldiers who'd been given shots of morphine for their pain in field hospitals in the First World War. Thousands of them. They became addicted, they were given a daily supply, and they lived healthy, productive lives. Look hard enough and you find there are some surprising names among those who combined life in the public eye with their addiction. The children's classic National Velvet was written by somebody who was to become what politicians would call a smackhead. Enid Bagnold spent years injecting morphine, which she got quite legally for an addiction she had developed after a hip operation. She lived until she was 91. Clive Froggatt was the health advisor to a sequence of Tory health secretaries. He was also a heroin addict. As a GP in Cheltenham, he spent 3 years until his arrest in 1994, forging prescriptions and supplying himself with regular doses of pure heroin.
I had to go to the pharmacy to get it, and as an addict, I did realize that if I got too much in one go, that I would tend to overuse it. So basically, I had to go to the pharmacist every morning before surgery. I would inject between 4 and 8 times a day, according to what I was doing. And so far as actually the injections were concerned, I really didn't have any more difficulty than a diabetic on insulin.
And during the time when you were using before your arrest, you were advising the government on health policy?
Yes.
So did that mean that you were going in for meetings with important people in Whitehall, ministers and so on?
Yes, yes.
And did they ever detect anything in your behaviour or suspect?
No, not at all. I mean, one of my tennis partners was the consultant in charge of addiction locally. He didn't. He didn't know, so, you know, nobody knew.
The big truth about the real danger of illicit drugs is concealed beneath all the rhetoric of the war. The epidemic of miserable deaths and ghastly side effects is not the result of the drug itself, but of the black market on which heroin is sold. Dirty drugs with all kinds of horrible impurities, dirty needles carrying lethal infections, accidental overdoses from deals of unknown strength. Prohibition creates the very dangers it pretends to be removing. In America in the 20s, gangsters brewed up illegal moonshine laced with things like meths, which blinded drinkers. There is no drug which becomes safer when you hand over its production to criminals. Once you struggle free of the big lie, the whole idea of prohibition becomes an absurdity. Then you can see that many users would be better off if we offered them a clean and legal supply of their drug. We could call a halt to the whole war. More and more specialists are starting to question the very idea of a war. Professor Jerry Stimpson is Director of Drug Research at Imperial College London.
The war on drugs really is a war against drug users, and that's a war against a large proportion of the adult population. It's a war against 4 out of 10 young men who've used an illicit drug in the last month. And it's totally unrealistic. I would like to see less drug use, and I'd certainly like to see less harmful drug use, but you don't get there by having a war on drugs or a war on drug users.
Labour MP Paul Flynn is another who's seen through the big lie.
The reason that they're dying from the use of illegal drugs is because of prohibition. It's because the market is controlled by criminals, and they're getting the most dangerous form of drugs and taking them in the most dangerous ways.
Specialist drug advisor Alan Parry has no doubt about the real choices facing us.
At the moment, the choice is not between kids not taking heroin, taking it. It's where they get the drug from, At the moment, if they're going to take heroin, they're going to take it anyway, but now they have to get involved with criminals, take dirty drugs with no advice, maybe with dirty needles.
I came to Brighton as they remembered the casualties of war, men who often died wretched and lonely deaths. Brighton now has the highest rate of illicit drugs death in the country. Drugs are the biggest single cause of death here for men aged between 20 and 44. You may think you know what has been killing these young people. But look again. Remember Enid Bagnold and Clive Froggatt, and look again. In the doorway of an old dole office in the middle of Brighton, I talked to Brian Henderson, a heroin addict for years.
I used to work at the Royal Mail. I used to work in the main sorting office in Glasgow, worked shift work, met a girl, had a mortgage, settled down, sort of thing. And next thing I met someone that I went to school with in the pub one night. I hadn't seen for about 13, 14 years. He's like, do you want to come back to my flat for a smoke? So I came in as in a joint. Came back to his flat and the foil was out, smoking heroin.
That first night of heroin smoking set Brian Henderson off on a steep downward path. Just as Enid Bagnold might be a classic heroin user for her generation, so Brian Henderson is typical of his. There was no legal daily supply for him, and so his stable life fell apart.
Started taking Mondays off, then it was Tuesdays off. Everything, I lost everything. My dad's a taxi driver, but also he had cash every day that started stealing his money. Pawned mum and dad's jewellery, pawned the video, pawned the television.
When his best friend died, Brian ran away to Brighton and found himself homeless. He slept in doorways, begged for a living, stole sometimes. But much worse was to follow. Because he was not allowed to get clean heroin with clean needles, Brian started to suffer horrific illnesses.
That leg there, the right leg, injected at my groin constantly. And one day it started to come up in a small lump. Then the next thing it was the size of a golf ball. And the pain was like somebody got me a red hot poker.
In your groin?
In your groin.
Brian was rushed into hospital. The main artery in his leg had blown out into a huge swelling, horribly infected by countless injections with dirty needles.
Brian came in with a huge infected aneurysm in his groin. That means the femoral artery in the groin, instead of being perhaps that size, was that size. The whole thing had been destroyed by a process of infection and necrosis.
They operated on Friday. I came round on Sunday, and they explained to me what had actually went on, and they told me to look at my leg.
What did you see?
And it was just a big hole that you could fitted an orange into. It was disgusting. And they said to me how close I was to losing my leg.
So you had the hole the size of an orange in your leg.
Yeah.
They've told you that they've nearly amputated it, but maybe they've saved it. But the fact is that after that, you carried on shooting gear.
Yeah.
You to the same leg?
The other leg.
Okay.
I moved to the other side.
It's not just dirty needles which wreak havoc. There's an even nastier story in the stuff which dealers mix with heroin. With a local phone call, I was about to get the recipe. I had been given the telephone number of a former heroin dealer in Brighton. Hi, it's Nick Davis.
Hello, Nick.
Have you got a moment to talk about this thing?
Yes,
Okay, so what do I need to bring with me? He agreed to show us how he used to cut his drugs. We said we'd get hold of some of the imitation heroin that's used sometimes by police and customs, and he gave us a shopping list of things to bring with us to his home. Okay, so the full shopping list is your large G-clamp, glucose, something like paracetamol, some sand, and that's the lot. Okay, all right, well, we'll see you later. Have you ever come across a street dealer who was selling pure, unadulterated heroin?
No.
It's always got something in it.
Yeah, I've heard of people putting in drain cleaner and things like that. You know?
Drain cleaner?
Yeah.
Well, is that in a powder?
It comes in crystals and they just crush it down, you know? And that's lethal.
Is it? Because it's just a poison?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, we'll put some paracetamol in. Or people mix anything in with them bad bits to make you, when you take it, feel drowsy and that, so you think you've had stronger gauge, you know?
Okay.
I'm going to make it into a brick form, because people think that when it's in solid, that it's being messed with less, you know?